We live in the very beautiful Washington state. Mountains, woods, camping galore. My friend Keenan and I decide to take advantage of a couple days off in the middle of the week that we both shared during the summer. So we go out to an area in the national forest about a few hours from where we live, somewhere around Suxun Creek. We decide on a small campsite in the area to camp, set up, and on goes our night. Now, we were camping on a Wednesday night, so we were the only ones in the campsite. Something we thought was nice at first, but would later realize wasn't nice at all. Everything was normal, campfire, shared stories, a couple beers amongst friends, and so on. It was getting late, so we jump in the tent and went to bed for the night. And then it begins. I wake up in the middle of the night to Keenan having night terrors. He's shouting and flailing and whatnot. I turn on my flashlight and wake him up and tell him he's just having a bad dream, attempting to calm him down. Keenan gets up and regains his cool and tells me he dreamt that someone or something was in the tent with us, and it wasn't right. Nothing about it was. I tell him again, it was just a dream, relax and get some sleep. I turned off my flashlight and tried to go back to sleep. Couple minutes later, I see Keenan's silhouette still standing there in the tent. And getting a bit frustrated, I say, "Keenan, it was nothing. Lay down and get to sleep." I then feel Keenan bump me on my arm and say, "I'm laying right here. What are you talking about?" I was still looking at the silhouette as Keenan muttered those words. I didn't say anything. I just froze. Felt ice in my bones and felt the most genuine sense of fear I've ever felt. And I stared at it for what felt like ages. Eventually, I just assumed my eyes were playing tricks until Keenan whispered, "Davis, do you see that thing standing in our tent?" At this point, I came unglued, completely freaked, screaming, flailing, you name it. Then it reared up. It was very tall, given the space in our tent. Skinny arms, extremely long fingers, probably 8 inches long, inverted legs like a flamingo, and pure black. It reared up, turned around and ripped out of our tent, and off it went, crashing into the night. At that point, we had never ran faster in our lives. Left everything and ran straight for the car, and off we went. Now, a couple weeks had passed, and I get a phone call in the middle of the night from Keenan. And Keenan is hysterical. He tells me that he was at a friend's house for a while, and he went back to his car to leave. Well, his friend has quite a long driveway, and Keenan found parking maybe 1/8 of a mile up the driveway. Well, Keenan's car was having difficulty starting. He'd turn the key, starter would engage, lights would come on, but the engine wouldn't turn over. He did this a number of times, and in his effort noticed a cat in the middle of the drive looking at him, illuminated by the headlights turning on and off. Well, finally, Keenan's car fired up. But where the cat was sitting was now that creature, standing broadside and staring at him. But only for a second, because at that moment, it took of running and jumped a massive creek, and off into the woods it ran. Keenan immediately called me, while tearing out of there like a bat out of hell. And that's the last we heard or saw of this thing. I love to camp, but after my most recent trip, I don't think it will ever be the same. I set up my tent on nice, flat ground and collected some wood for a fire. The night came with all its nightly sounds, and I relaxed at the hooting owls and chirping crickets. Even better was the fact that no one else was around. "Help!" someone said. It was subtle. I almost missed it. The voice came from deep within the woods, and for a moment, I didn't believe what I was hearing. It sounded female, but oddly enough, I just couldn't tell. "Please help," it continued. I shined my flashlight between the bushes and walked around. To be completely honest, even as a grown man, I was paralyzed with fear. So, I did the responsible thing and called the local police. That's when things went from odd to very, very weird. The police told me to ignore it. I explained to them that someone could be injured and probably needed medical attention, but they assured me otherwise. When I kept pushing and asked why, they told me, "Sir, if you ever hear that voice again, ignore it. Do not respond and do not approach." Well, I did hear it again, but I didn't ignore it. It was almost midnight when I heard the voice a second time. I awoke to someone whispering, "Help," and it sounded like she was just outside my tent. I went out to check and no one was there, but the voice continued from a distance, "Help, please." Again, I grabbed my flashlight and looked around the area I was camping. I was too afraid to follow the voice into the woods, especially since the authorities themselves avoided it. But then I heard another, different voice. This other voice, which also seemed to be coming from the woods, was an octave lower. Unlike the first one, which cried for help, this one was loud and demanding. "Quiet!" the other voice demanded. "No one's going to help you!" Once I heard that, I was sure someone was in trouble. I called the police again. When I informed them about a second voice coming from the woods, they seemed even more concerned. They told me that I should pack my things and leave the campsite immediately. They said that hearing the second, more manly voice meant that it was getting desperate. They also said that the two voices were coming from the same person. That part was bizarre and confused me, to say the least. It was, at this point, I dismissed the police in that area as crazy, but not before telling them off. I told them that if they didn't get down here to come and check it out, then I would do it myself. I said repeatedly that a woman could be in serious trouble and that it was their duty to help her, but still they refused to come. All they kept repeating to me over the phone was, "Do not enter the woods, sir." They seemed more afraid than I was. Once I hung up the phone, I heard the voices again. A gentle, "Please, somebody help me." And then a growling, "Quiet, no one's coming." It was a little past midnight at that point. I grabbed some things and ventured into the woods. When I entered the woods, the voices ceased. Just like that. No cries, no whispers, and no commands. Even the owls and crickets went away. Nothing but dancing leaves and creaking tree branches. I stopped walking and looked around, a full 360 degrees. "Hello? Anyone here?" I called out. Nothing. "I'm here to help," I continued. "Where are you? Are you okay?" Still nothing. I thought of calling the police again, then chuckled to myself. I found it strange, but somewhat comforting that I didn't find anyone out there. Nonetheless, I was still creeped out, so I packed my things and finally left the campsite. I didn't know why the police, of all people, were so afraid. It was later that I found out when I heard that voice again a fourth time, a week after I left the campsite, coming from inside my own house. I became very, very concerned. Years ago, my girlfriend and I were teachers, and in June of each year, we would take a group of kids camping. We had a 12-person tent set up on our site, which was right next to a small lake. The site included a picnic table and a fire ring. Part of the trip was telling campfire stories about the Jersey Devil, since the campground was located in an area where there had been many sightings over the years. The kids enjoyed being scared, and they couldn't wait to return the following year. This was around the 5th annual trip we had taken, and up to that point, nothing had happened. On the last night after the stories, when the kids were safely asleep, my girlfriend and I sat by the campfire in beach chairs. We had just bought a new puppy, and she was tied to the tent on a long lead so she could run around. Suddenly, the logs in the fire collapsed, and the light from the fire dimmed considerably. Our propane torch that was on the picnic table dimmed at the same time, It became almost pitch black, and that's when the puppy started to growl. She was right next to me, and every hair on her back was standing straight up as she stared into the darkness. Suddenly, from out of the water, comes this large figure about 20 yards from our sight. At first, I thought it was a person, but then it bent over and started running on all fours. I could only see the outline of the thing, and the back end was higher than the front. It wasn't a bear or a dog or a deer. It looked and ran like something I had never seen. It was in no hurry, as it just trotted by and into the woods near our sight. I jumped up and ran to my car and turned on the lights. The car lights lit up our campsite, but there was no sign of anything out of the ordinary. I told my girlfriend to wake the kids because we were leaving. She was the braver one and convinced me to stay. We eventually calmed down and turned in for the night. I lay down by the tent opening with a large butcher knife and did not sleep until the sun came up. Nothing like this has ever happened to me before or since, but I swear I saw something that was not a man or an animal. I haven't been back camping since.